So I wanted to do a video today to kind of talk about functions in Swift and how they may differ from functions in JavaScript or other languages like Python. So if you're coming from a language like JavaScript, for example, one of the things that's really nice about JavaScript is that it's what's called a duck-type language, or it's a truly dynamic language, and meaning that basically there's no true type system like you're used to having with languages like C# or Java. And Swift is actually a statically typed language, but one of the things they've done that's very nice inside of Swift is that if you don't specify a type, they infer a type. So for instance, if you're setting a variable to, let's say, a string, if you set that variable to a string when you're declaring that as like a var or let, Swift automatically knows that that's going to be a string. You don't have to specify it's a string. And the same thing actually applies to functions as well. So for instance, like if you are doing a function, you don't specify a return type, then Swift will just infer that it's a void function or a function that returns void. So I want to do a quick video here and kind of describe basically what the function signatures look like inside of Swift and what that corresponds to if you've used a language like JavaScript. So let's take a quick look. So if we look right here, I have a little play code page up where I can just kind of play around with some JavaScript and show you what it looks like. Right here I have a function called add, which takes two parameters and then it calculates basically what those two parameters would be if they were added to each other. And so if I want to see that, all I have to do is come over here and I can say add, and we'll put in, let's say, 3 and 4, and that should give us 7. If we look down here in the console, we can see here that it's already calculated that out. But typically with a function, what you'll want to do is kind of return that value back. And so JavaScript is actually pretty easy to do. All you have to do in this example is, I'm going to come here to the end of this, and instead of console lining out, I want to return what that actual value is. So I'm going to say return and say a plus b. And now what that'll do is that'll actually return that value back. So I can come over here, I can say result is equal to that. And if I want to see what that looks like, I can just come over here and do a console.log. And we'll put the result in there. And it shows us here the result is 7. So let's take a look and see how we would do this in Swift. So if I come over here, I've got a playground opened up. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a function here, name it the same thing. And in Swift, if you want to create a function, you don't have to type the function keyword out. You can just type in func like that. And I can go over here, I can say add. And then I can put in a. But since this is a strictly typed language, you have to specify the type. In this case, I want to add up two integers. So I'm going to say, put the little colon in there and say int for an integer. And then put my second value in here, also put a colon and say int. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before with that JavaScript function. I'm just going to print out the results. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, we'll just do, let's see here, a plus b is going to be equal to, and we will say a plus b. Now if I come over here and I call that function, I can just say add, and we'll put in 3 and 5 this time. But being that this is Swift, we also have to specify the parameter. So I'm going to say a, because this essentially is the parameters are named by default. And I'll say b here. And you can see right here, it's returning the value of 7 for that. But just like with the JavaScript, maybe I want to return this value out instead of just trying to console it out. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to comment that out. And you just do that by putting 2 forward slashes in there. And I'm going to say return a plus b. And one of the things you'll notice here is I'm getting this error. It says unexpected non-void return value for the void function. And this basically means that I haven't specified return type. And so one of the things you also have to do in Swift, if you don't specify return type, Swift just infers that you're trying to make this void. So for instance, if I wasn't trying to output a result, I was just trying to print it out, another way I could say this is I can come over here and I could say dash greater than void. And that's essentially the same thing as what I was doing before. That will still work. But in this case, what I want to do is I want to return an integer value back out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in an int. So I'm going to be returning an int. And we'll comment this out and return that. And now what I can do is I can come over here and I can say let result equal to that value being added to each other. And I'm going to print that out. And that should be result. And we'll run that. And we can see that we're getting 8 back for the result. And so this is kind of the basic way that you can define a function inside of Swift. On a side note, one of the things you can also do, for instance, if you don't want to specify named parameters, something you can do is you can come over here and you can put in an underscore at the beginning. And that's because there's a shorthand inside of Swift so that you can specify a different value, so to speak, or a different variable name than what's displayed to the user. So for instance, you might want to say, in this case, you might want to say something like 2 instead of underscore here. So what I can do is I can come over here and I can say take 3 and add that to 5. And that essentially does the same thing. So you can specify a different named parameter that's different from the variable name that you're using for that parameter, and now that'll work the same way. So that's a quick example of how you can create functions and use functions inside of Swift. There's actually a lot more you can do with this. Just like with JavaScript, you can include closures or essentially pass functions or functionality into the function as a parameter. I'll do some future videos on that and how you do that inside of Swift. But in the meantime, if you like the channel, please subscribe. If you like this video, please click a thumbs up and I can make more of them. Have a nice day.